Road Signs. Chapter 12, Transferring the Arrow to Yourself. Unfortunately, I can't tell you about it. This is classified material, and you, Perchik, are a freelancer. So, don't be angry. The Strugatsky Brothers. Snail on the Slope. We got to our train and saw that the snow had melted. The train was dirty, but all the doors were still locked. There were a lot of tracks on the rails around, but the tracks were old. They had formed when the snow was still there, and there was a lot of droppings near the last car. I thought that I should check what was left in the cars, take and unhook the unnecessary ones. On the other hand, a spare is not a burden, and a car, even an empty one, can be used in many ways. So, I was too lazy to check what was there and how it was inside, and, as it turned out later, in vain. Vladimir Pavlovich spent the whole day digging around in the mechanisms of the diesel locomotive, having kicked me out into the next car. I slept, woke up, and slept again. Having lost track of time, I tossed and turned on the floor of the engine room and hoped to see some prophetic dream. I didn't dream anything. Apparently, dreams don't come to order. Finally, shaking off the sleepy charm, I discovered that Vladimir Pavlovich had been sitting next to me for a long time, reading the mathematician's ledger. Vladimir Pavlovich had a gloomy face, and it was also clear from his face that reading irritated him. I asked him what he had found in someone else's notes. That's what he found. Look, our mathematician didn't need any contact with the people from St. Petersburg. He didn't need the people from St. Petersburg or people living outside our metro. He needed the technology for restoring old fuel. That's what he set out on his journey for. These are additives to fuel, supposedly for its rejuvenation. He wanted to get these miracle additives for fuel, and then to hell with them, with people, even if the grass doesn't grow. You and I were engaged in high philosophy and reflected, but he was boring and simple, a normal swindler. Why a swindler? Well, if not a swindler, then an ordinary merchant. It's just surprising how he lost his war. He died stupidly for no reason, so to speak, and we thought we sold our souls to the devil himself, went on a journey with a great purpose. It wasn't he who deceived us. It was we who bought it. We bought it, not from his words, but from our own myth about preferences. So what now? What do we mean? What do we say at home? As you suggested, we can lie. We're like two slaves whose master died, and they suddenly found themselves the owners of all his property. Why lie? We can honestly say, like, we saw that everyone died. But then we'll deprive them of hope, because the St. Petersburg metro is like Alpha Centauri. What does Alpha Centauri have to do with it? Considering that it's the closest place in the universe to us where people can live, and the St. Petersburg metro is the closest place to Moscow where people can live after the cataclysm. And not just people, where a civilization can exist. And if it doesn't exist, then no new unification of people is possible. We are alone in this post-nuclear universe. So you suggest we lie? Say that everything is fine, that the city is alive, and we have brothers who thirst for our love. Without noticing it, I began to express myself in some kind of elevated language. I, Sasha, don't know. On the one hand, on the other hand, I don't know. It's impossible to test us. This is a philosophical situation. The problem of the unknowability of the world. Even if we brought news of the flourishing world of underground St. Petersburg, where would be the guarantee that it would not perish a week after our return? Or, to put it another way, why shouldn't people live with this belief that they are not alone? They may not do anything to bring the meeting with the Petersburgers closer, but their frame of mind will be different, brighter, or something. But don't books teach us? I had nothing else to learn from. that every lie for salvation is the beginning of a great tragedy. And won't we end up in some big ass? I added the last to knock down the emerging pathos. Books teach nothing. Books only tell stories similar to those happening around us. Whether you like it or not, we are now the two people who are really making history. Only we thought that we would be the first messengers, bring some news to our underground world and all that. And now we can only come to our own and say, but they hid from you that there is a connection between the cities, a bad one, irregular, but it exists. You are all, dear Muscovites, victims of a conspiracy. Well, we will wait until we are found one fine day without arms, without legs, without a head. That's always the case with whistleblowers. He was right, but I felt no joy from it. We were like the remnants of Columbus's crew, who suddenly found out that they were not the discoverers, that the Spanish Queen had long ago corresponded with the American Indians. Only they all kept the correspondence secret. The question was, what is a secret? It is not, of course, that someone still survived. Many guessed and believed in this, but that there is communication between the cities. We could only be the first people to return from a journey not in 20 years, but in some recent time. And instead of joyful travelers who bring their people information about another world, we may turn out to be unnecessary witnesses. And Vladimir Pavlovich did not scare me very much with his words, or rather he did not say anything new. What they can do with the managers and owners of someone else's secret for reasons of practical expediency, I in general guessed. But further on the road a surprise awaited us. We stopped near the Povarovo station. There were many tracks. After all, it was a large railway junction. The tracks were clogged, and we even took a flat car, forgotten on the tracks, onto the locomotive's buffers, and began to move it in front of us. But we didn't push it for long. There were no tracks. In fact, there was no road. I began to think that the blast zone began there. But it was something else. There was no road, and right in front of us lay a huge crater. It was smoking with something pink and blue, and oozing with a lilac fog. At the same time, the radiation level here was completely normal. Normal, of course. In the terms that were used after the cataclysm, it was impossible to believe that a place after a nuclear explosion could look like this for 20 years in a row. There weren't even any versions here. I wouldn't climb into this funnel. Life treated me and treated me, treated me and treated me, and practically cured me out of excessive curiosity. Especially over the last year. No, in another life. But what to do next was unclear. Vladimir Pavlovich backed up and stopped. He took out the mathematician's ledger and looked at the drawn and printed maps for a long time. The drawn ones were marked as fresh, and the printed ones, more beautiful and accurate, were brought to light even before the cataclysm. Comparing them, Vladimir Pavlovich muttered something and finally made a decision. "I've figured out what we'll do. We'll move along the switch to the right now, then go to the marshalling yard in Manikino along the bypass road, and then back to Moscow. That is, we'll leave the tracks of the Oktyabrskaya road for the Riga direction of the Moscow road. Now, God bless us, I wish we could do it." He looks like Suvorov, I thought. And indeed, my comrade began to look like Generalissimo Suvorov, as he was depicted in books, with a tuft on his head, dry and focused. And his tuft was gray. How did I not notice that? The steep hills have flattened Sivka. Vladimir Pavlovich has gone completely gray. That's how it turns out. I went bald, he went gray. We wanted to find a scarlet flower, but all we saw were monsters without any compensation for moral damage. But you say, damn, 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 And here it is. The monsters did not keep us waiting long. They were not real monsters, but something that caused a terrible, pulsating fear. A lilac fog began to crawl out of the hollow, similar to dough. Even from a distance it seemed dense and viscous. I have long felt that the most terrible, paralyzing danger is not like people and animals. When inanimate nature tries to kill you, you feel humiliated. Time flowed quickly for us, and Vladimir Pavlovich led the diesel locomotive back to the place where the branch went to the right. The fog followed us, like the big water of Leningrad, like a flood. Like jam from a jar, it flowed onto the ground, but I did not want to test it for sweet properties at all. The switch was in front of us, but I saw that it was not that simple. There were many tracks, but 3 of them went to the right. The far left track ran into a wall covered with bast, that is, into a dead end. The other, far right, ended in a slope. There was clearly a landslide there. Part of the track had collapsed, and bent rails stuck out in all directions, like reinforcement in a broken concrete block. The right track to Manakino and Kubinka was the middle one. But even Vladimir Pavlovich, who had seen many different railway mechanisms, was amazed here. He was also amazed when he mistook Buddhists for railway repairmen. As it turned out later, there were people in orange on the tracks, and some kind of unseen repairmen, and there were some explanations for everything. But here in front of us was a pure miracle. A traffic light was burning in front of us, changing the color of the signal every now and then. It was an automatic switch, which turned out to be alive. Next to it, on a high pole, stood a solar battery, and the switch clicked every now and then, moving the rails to extreme positions. It had probably been clicking like that for all 20 years, gradually going crazy. But we were dealing with it now, without any hope of guessing the right position. A lilac fog was pressing in from one side, and the switch continued to click its switches fussily. We were slowly but inexorably approaching it, and then Vladimir Pavlovich carefully took off his cap and jacket and simply said, "I'll hold it, and you go. Don't you dare stop, do you hear?" Before I could blink, he picked up the machine gun and jumped to the ground. I stuck my head out the window and saw Vladimir Pavlovich swing the butt of his rifle at the solar batteries and then at the cabinet on the counter. Nothing worked for him. The switch lived its own life. Then he tried to jam the mechanism with the barrel, but the soulless machine chewed up the creation of the gunsmith Kalashnikov like a mouse chews up a noodle. Vladimir Pavlovich de-energized the switch and, resting his boots on the sleepers, threw the rod into the right position. The diesel locomotive sailed past him, and I watched as it waved at me, as if to say, "Go ahead, I'll catch up." "He'll catch up now," I thought, and repeated out loud to convince myself of this. "He'll catch up, he'll catch up." But how can you convince him when the last car had already passed the switch and Vladimir Pavlovich was still where he was standing? Something happened to him. Did his leg get stuck or something? But it still wasn't funny. Whatever you say, my comrade was wasting precious time. The embankment was bending, and our train was bending along with it. Soon, the last carriage hid the little figure from me, and when I saw this place again, a lilac fog was already swirling there. There was no point in going back. Vladimir Pavlovich had disappeared like a bush disappears in the fog. In addition to the pain of separation, I felt resentment, how inopportunely he had left me forever. Now, I had to make decisions myself. I looked longingly at the late mathematician's ledger and the box with cards and hard drives tied to it.